Hey there, you're about to discover something rich people get away with all the time that average, ordinary, everyday folks almost never get away with. I just saw a video with Elon Musk being interviewed by a BBC reporter, and the BBC reporter asked some very, very underhanded questions, and Elon Musk laid him out. And now you're about to learn how you can do that without you having to be the richest person in the world. Here it is.
Free speech is meaningless unless you allow people you don't like to say things you don't like. Otherwise, it's irrelevant.
That's so good. Elon said, free speech is irrelevant unless you allow people you don't like to say things that you don't like. See, things that you don't like, you should not be afraid of. If you're afraid of things you don't like, the reason you're afraid of them is because you know in your heart of hearts that you might just be wrong. The truth never has to be afraid of a lie. Light never has to be afraid of darkness. You can't bring in enough lies to make the truth a lie, and you can't bring in enough darkness to chase away the light. But a little bit of light gets rid of a whole lot of darkness, and a little bit of truth erases a lot of lies. We can't be afraid to listen to people we don't like, say things we don't like. So critical.
And if at the point at which you lose free speech, it doesn't come back.
I think the issue, some people...
Another point he made, at the point which you lose free speech, it doesn't come back. And we've seen it happen over and over and over again. In Nazi Germany, in Communist Russia, in Communist China, do you understand the government can arrest you for saying things? They can arrest you for thinking things. Do you understand that that's what America is trying to move towards? Being able to arrest people for thinking and saying things? Do you It's mind-blowing.
People have is that a lot of people were brought back. I mean, some people were brought back who were previously banned for spreading things like...
The issue some people have, a lot of people were brought back. So is it some people or is it a lot of people? I'm confused.
QAnon conspiracies. You have people like Andrew Tate who were brought back, who were previously banned for things like hate speech. Do you think you prioritize freedom of speech?
You have people like Andrew Tate who were brought back, who were banned previously for things like hate speech. Like, I hate the term hate speech. That's my hate speech right there. I hate the term hate speech. Why? Because everybody wants to use it as a term, but nobody wants to define it. What is hate speech? Give me a definition of hate speech. Is it like when somebody says something you hate, or is it when you say something somebody else hates? What is hate speech? And then he brings the most extreme example, Andrew Tate, right? To prove his point, because his point is weak, he has to use an extreme example to try to make his point.
Over misinformation and hate speech.
Well, you know, who's to say that something is misinformation?
Do you think you prioritize freedom of speech over misinformation and hate speech? I hope all of us do. Like, what kind of crazy do you prioritize freedom of speech over misinformation and hate speech? Yes, I do. Yes. Why? Because freedom of speech gives everybody the opportunity to examine all sides of an argument to find out who's lying and who's telling the truth. The voices of reason never want to silence the voices of stupidity. It's the voices of stupidity that want to silence the voices of reason.
Who is the arbiter of that? Is it the BBC?
You're literally asking me?
Yes.
Well, no.
Who's to say that something is misinformation? Who is the arbiter of that? Are you the arbiter? Am I the arbiter? Right? Is your next door neighbor the arbiter? Is the person you agree with the arbiter, or is the person you disagree with the arbiter? See, the reason having these vague terminologies is so destructive is because it creates anarchy, because everybody who thinks they're right now goes in their own direction. It doesn't make any sense. Hate speech, freedom of speech is way more important than hate speech. Way more important. Because freedom, what does freedom of speech mean? You can say what you want to say, and you can think. Freedom of thought means you can think what you want to think. Even if you're wrong, we allow our children to be wrong when they're growing up. That's how they learn how to be right. We can't be afraid of ideas and afraid of words. If we are, I'm telling you, we're on a slippery slope that we can't come back from.
You are the arbiter on Twitter because you own Twitter.
Yes, I'm saying who is to say that?
He said he asked this BBC reporter, who is the arbiter? Is the BBC going to be the arbiter?
One person's misinformation is another person's information. Are you literally asking me? The point at which you said that...
He says, you're the arbiter on Twitter because you own Twitter. That's right. But even though he's the arbiter on Twitter, he prioritizes free speech over hate speech Because he's smart.
There is, this is misinformation. Like, who is going
But
to
you accept that
decide
misinformation can be dangerous. That
I hate to keep stopping this, but I have to. Because, like, Elon's spitting bars. He said one person's misinformation is another person's information. And that's so true. So, this is me, personally. You can do whatever you want to do. I love having conversations with people I disagree with. Because if they're right, I want to find out so I can get right. And if they're wrong, I want to know why so I can stand my ground. So good, Elon. Thank you for being you.
it can cause real world harms, that it can potentially cause.
Yeah, so the point I'm trying to make is that the BBC itself has, at times, published things that are false. Do you agree that that has occurred?
I'm quite sure.
So what do you think? Do you think misinformation can be dangerous and cause worldwide harm? What does that even mean? Misinformation can be dangerous and cause worldwide harm. Well, yeah, but we have to first examine the information to find out which one's misinformation, this side of the argument or that side of the argument, right? We can't be afraid to look at it because it might be misinformation. That's the whole point.
The BBC have said things before that turn out to not be true.
Correct.
In its, whatever it is, 100-year history.
I love the fact that he said, I love the fact that he said, has the BBC at times published things that are false? And then he shook his head up and down and said, would you agree that that would be true? I love it because Elon is 100% congruent in everything he's saying. He's asking questions. He believes what he believes. His head's going up and down. The other guy's backpedaling and trying to avoid questions.
I'm quite sure.
Yes. Even if you aspire to be accurate, there are times when you will not be.
We've spoken to people very recently who were involved in.
It said things that have turned out not to be true in its 100-year history. Oh, so only once or twice in its 100-year history, huh? Every other time they were right. I don't think so.
Moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
What hate
something that
speech are you talking
address?
about? I mean, you use Twitter.
Right.
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
We've spoken to people recently who are involved in moderation, who say there are not enough moderators around this thing. We don't have enough people to police these things. You've spoken to people. I wish Elon would have asked him, which people exactly have you spoken with? So good.
I mean,
But just a personal anecdote, like what do you? I don't.
Personally, for you, I would see I get.
That's a very specific question. You use Twitter. Do you see a rise in hate speech? Watch the guy's answer.
I get more of that kind of content, yeah, personally. But I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
So you
But
see more hate
personally,
speech personally?
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah.
Personally, I get it. I get that kind of hate speech, but I'm not going to talk for the rest of Twitter. This guy is lying his pants off. Like, if liar, liar, pants on fire were a thing, he would be incinerated already.
I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No, I don't know. That's why I asked the question.
No,
Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content. And I'm asking.
Something that may include something slightly racist or slightly sexist. Another point, another iteration of this guy going to an extreme to try to prove his point that he doesn't have. He doesn't even have a point, which is why he can't prove it.
For specific examples, and you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
You
don't.
can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why, because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore, because I just don't particularly like it.
See, he tried to escape from his feed earlier. Now he's trying to go back to his feed.
Actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look
hang
at
on a second.
my
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last.
Honestly, I'll tell you why I can't name an example, because I don't use that feed. What? But I thought you just saw more in your feed. Which one is it? Liar, liar, pants on fire. Elon, you better get out of there. The house is about to burn down.
3 or 4 weeks, and
Well, then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying...
I say, sir, that you don't know what...
He's backed into a corner now. You can't name one. Well, I haven't used that for 3 or 4 weeks. Then how have you seen the hateful content?
are you talking about?
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet. And yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
I'm asking for
that's
one example.
false.
You can't give a single one.
What I claimed...
You just lied.
What I claimed was there are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed
one
or
example.
not... I mean, right, and
Literally
you can
can't
look at
name
something
one.
like the...
By the way, there are millions of tweets a day. If there are millions of tweets a day, and you see like an increase in hateful content in your feed that you don't use and haven't used for the last 3 weeks, you should be able to name one. One is like only one more than 0. It's one less than 2. It's just one. A rise includes some, but he's just asking for, he can't even give one.
The Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
Yes, my favorite part in the whole video, you just lied. And you know what? He did just lie, but he didn't just lie. He's been lying the whole time. Everything that's coming out of this guy's mouth is a lie. And he's trying to use a lie to silence the truth and then back up his points with points he doesn't even have. He can't even, and even if he does have a point, he can't make it. So you just lied. He lied. By the way, one of the things that we have to start doing, those of us who believe in like right and wrong and true and false and up and down and wet and dry and good and bad, those of us who believe those things, we have to start speaking up and stop allowing the loud minority to create all the rules for the world that we and our children and grandchildren are going to have to live in for the rest of our lives.
Look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a
Right.
single example, and you can't name one.
right, and as I've already said, I don't use that feed. But
Well, then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
That's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would
say,
you
for a
know this
few
hateful
weeks.
content?
Because I'm
You can't, he still can't name, now he starts citing, well, there are organizations that have noticed it. But you can't name, well, all sorts of organizations, and he still can't name one.
saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on.
And then he says, he tries to back, I don't think this is getting anywhere. It's not getting anywhere because you won't answer, like you want him to answer your question, but you're not answering his questions. And all he's looking for is, all Elon Musk is looking for in this interview is clarification so he can answer your question. But you're not giving him any clarification because you don't have any.
We only have a certain amount of time.
Wow.
COVID misinformation. You
Amazing.
You changed the COVID misinformation
Has
rules.
BBC changed its COVID misinformation?
The BBC does not set the rules on Twitter, so I'm asking you.
No, I'm talking about the BBC's misinformation about.
You've changed the COVID misinformation rules. And then he says, has the BBC. Well, here's the interesting thing. It doesn't matter which news brand you watch. They all change the misinformation around COVID over and over and over again. Fauci changed his 7,000 times. The CDC changed theirs who knows how many times. Like, every time they opened their mouth, they were telling a different lie. See, here's what you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me what the lie is if you lie to me. Because if you lie to me, you told me everything I need to know about everything you're going to say from now on. You told me that you are a liar.
COVID.
I'm literally asking you about, you changed the labels, the COVID misinformation labels. There used to be a policy, and then it then disappeared. Why do that?
Well, COVID is no longer an issue.
Why do that? Now he's not asking, he's asking why he changed the COVID misinformation policies. Because, well, first of all, because the people who created them were your friends. And they were spreading their propaganda about COVID to gain control over the minds of people, which is exactly the agenda of the elitist, self-righteous, planet-saving, agenda-pushing media.
Does the BBC hold itself at all responsible for misinformation regarding masking and side effects of vaccinations, and not reporting on that at all?
Does the BBC hold themselves accountable for the misinformation around masking and the side effects of vaccinations? That's a great question. that a lot of people would like to know the answer to.
And what about the fact that the BBC was put under pressure by the British government to change its editorial policy? Are you aware of that?
This is not an interview about the BBC.
Oh, you thought it wasn't?
He said, this is not a dispute about the BBC. He said, oh, you thought it wasn't. You brought the fight to me, bro. You came to me. You came out swinging at me. I'm asking you questions for clarification. You can't give me a single solitary answer. All you're doing is showing the world that you don't even have the ability to think. You just think you think.
I see now why you've done Twitter Spaces. I am not a representative of the BBC's editorial policy. I want to make that clear. Let's talk about something else. If you want to talk about the BBC, all right. Let's talk about something else.
This interview was so great. Thank you, Elon Musk, for standing up in the face of this ridiculous agenda of people who just want to make sure everybody who disagrees with them sits in a corner and sits quietly somewhere. Thank you for doing that, but you don't have to be Elon Musk to do that. You don't have to be Myron Golden to do that. You don't have to be Bill Gates or some rich person that owns a big company in order to speak your mind. When you're having a conversation at Thanksgiving with your family around and somebody brings up something stupid, ask them some questions so they can discover the idiocy of their argument. They don't need to feel like an idiot, but if your argument doesn't make any sense, it doesn't make any sense, and talking about it longer or louder, here's what's really interesting. Saying something louder doesn't make it more true. Did I say that too fast? Here's the thing. I'm a black man in the United States of America. I'm 61 years old. I'll be 62 next month. I was born May 14th, 1961 in a segregated hospital. The conditions of that hospital were so poor that I contracted polio before I was a year old. This was 6 or 7 years after the polio vaccine was discovered. I walked with a metal brace on my leg my entire life because of discrimination and racism. So nobody can tell me that racism hasn't affected my life. But even though racism has negatively impacted my life, here's what I'm going to say. In America, if a person is a racist, they have to have a right to be a racist if we're going to have free speech. Like, a person should have a right to be wrong. Because if we give them a right to be wrong, everybody eventually is going to find out that they're wrong. Like, the truth will always, rise again. So, we don't have to be afraid. The truth does not have to be afraid of a lie, but a lie has to be afraid of the truth. If somebody wants to be a racist, let them be a racist. I think it's not very good. I think it's not very smart. But if somebody is bound and determined to be an idiot, let them be an idiot. And let them wallow in the quagmire of their own stupidity. I love what Mark Twain said. Never argue with an idiot. They will bring you down to their level and beat you with experience. Here's what we do have to do. We have to stand our ground. We have to not allow these radical, non-thinking, thinking they're thinking people to back us into a corner where we get all emotionally riled up and then we say something that we don't really even believe. Just let's make them define the words they use when they're talking to us. That's one thing we can do. Somebody says, oh, you're just a sexist. What is a sexist? What do you mean by sexist? Then I can agree or disagree with you. Oh, you're just a racist. Well, what do you mean by racist? Then I can agree or disagree with you. Oh, you're just, and instead of letting somebody use an ad hominem fallacy where they call you a name that disqualifies your point of view, make them argue their point all the way down to the nth degree so they can discover if they're wrong. Because I'm going to tell you something about me. I love having conversations with people I disagree with. I love listening to people do speeches that I disagree with. Why? Because if they're right and I'm wrong, I want to find out so I can change and be better. And if they're wrong and I'm right, I want to know why, and I want to know how, and that I can stand my ground. Just remember this. Truth doesn't have to be afraid of a lie, and light doesn't have to be afraid of darkness. Be truth. Be light. And let your voice be heard. Let me know what you think. This is crazy. Can you believe this stuff is going on? I can. But you don't have to be Elon Musk to fight it. All right, have a great day, my peeps. Peace out.